Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with Arcane Season 1, Episode 2, Some Mysteries Are Better Left Unsolved. Normally I like to give a little bit of like a summary here, but for a show like this with this much string continuity, I'm not sure that's even really valuable in the usual method. Like, how do you summarize this? So the story moves forward a few more steps. Right? Like, how do you summarize this? The story's moving forward a few more steps. That's what's happening. There's your summary. The end. I don't know. Weird. So now we see the other side of things. And this makes absolutely perfect sense. It's Jace and Caitlin was her name. I do like literally showing what was happening on the other side of the door during the whole lead up and during the whole heist gone wrong. There's always a heist gone wrong. Oh, hey, it's the thing for Pearl, and it's for 3 months. It even says right there, it's for 3 months. I thought you lied to me, Imperial Store Destroyer. The transition from Jace talking about how awful everything was, like how so the explosion happens, he catches a glimpse of Vi, he passes out, and the pass out transitions neatly into a flashback from when he was a child, where he and his mother were probably on another planet, multiverse, and were on the verge of freezing to death when a mage shows up and warps them away, which, yeah, no, that completely makes perfect sense. And it also explains away a huge amount of his motivations and his mentality. He actually says this later, show then tell, but the gap between those two is about 20 minutes, so I'm completely okay with that. What I also find interesting is the mathematical approach to magic, something that's very common in fiction. The guy who's casting doesn't go whoosh. He, sets things up, gets the gem ready to power it, and starts running the equations, which then allows them to teleport. At which point they end to go into the 2001: A Space Odyssey very briefly, and a whole lot is established very, very quickly. Now, there's this brief thing. This feels so deliberate, I cannot imagine it's on accident, but I have to admit, of all the theories and speculations I have so far, I have no idea what's going on with the bracer. Let me explain for a second. So Jace obviously has this bracer that he's made for himself at some point in his life, and it has this little gem in it, which is the gem that the mage gave him when he was a child. Okay, that makes sense. But the show, which is extremely well crafted, which means this is probably done on purpose, makes a deliberate reference to a shot from the previous episode. In that episode, Vander looks down at the exact same bracer in the exact same spot where it is, and as he's looking at it, runs his finger down it, or actually down it, not up it. He specifically mentions that there are things worse, that there are worse things that could happen. We then cut to this episode, and Jace, who, while he's sitting in jail, awaiting, whatever's going to happen next, goes, looks down, exact same shot, runs his hand down the bracer. I'm not sure of the significance of that, though. It's not like it's a magic bracer. The gem is long since depowered. It's just a memoir from him. There could be some more thematic connection between the two, literally like wearing something on your sleeve, ha ha. But otherwise, I don't actually know where that's going with it. It's just something that caught my eye. Anyways, then we have Heimerdinger introduced. I hope I'm actually pronouncing that correctly. Our first speaking non-human role, who is of course 307 years old. And what's really interesting about this is that this is a very, very common trend. In fact, this is such a common trend, I'm sure you've heard of it, because you've probably heard of Yoda. It's a very, very common thing to portray someone who is silly, ridiculous, or otherwise humorous, who's actually the elderly wise one. Anime tends to transition this a little bit into the cute little girl who's a 1,000-year-old dragon kind of thing, but it's the same general concept. You have that contrast, that juxtaposition, in order to try and add some accents to the character. Again, Yoda. But, I mean, it's freaking Yoda, right? You get the idea. So, Heimerdinger absolutely follows into the same thing. He clearly means a lot of what he says, and that wonderful... I'm skipping ahead a little bit. But this wonderful... not matte painting. It's like a oil painting or something like that. This wonderfully painted shot. I wish I could just freeze frame, because I could spend several minutes just analyzing the one painting where he is giving his flashback of some kind of mage war or mage domination in their past. says all it needs to. It's incredible, but I'm getting way ahead of myself, so let's rewind back to Heimerdinger. So yeah, he's the wise one. He definitely has a lot of idea what's going on, and he clearly indicates early on, in fact, that magic bad. No, not yet, Bonic, not yet. Magic bad, and go ahead, go ahead. Except he does a voice. I can't do that. I can't do that kind of voice. No. I can do a Ferengi voice if you want. But imagine someone walks up and says, "So you see," and that's actually the wise in character part. Anyways, so he walks up. He says, "Don't talk about magic. We'll give you a slap on the wrist. Everything will be cool. Let's get on with it." Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but as I was processing the episode as it went on, I realized that he is probably one of the best examples of how corrupt and decadent the council that leads Piltover is. I know that sounds weird, because he's the good guy. But I mean that. Because he's the good guy. A guy willing to subvert the law and to subvert public safety and destroy their own system for the sake of nepotism, because that is what this is at its most fundamental form, in order to try and segue away from this, rather than trying to adjust the laws to adjust for a more civil and legal discourse, or trying to fight back against the need to find a scapegoat, which is what the entire episode is focused on, or anything like that, right? He could be doing so much to try and change the situation for the better, but instead all he's doing is trying to more or less literally sweep this under the rug in a way that is almost assuredly illegal and unethical. Legally unethical, I should be clear about that. And that's the best the council has to offer, at least from what we've seen so far. Think about that. Anyways, so he advises him, "We'll give you a slap on the wrist. You did wrong. It was dangerous. Everything's fine." And they've already got several people voting for him, including Caitlyn's mother, who's apparently rather well-to-do since she is also a member of the council. The council itself is fascinating, but we'll come back to that in just a minute. Come back to that. We shift from Jace, who is so helpless, he's actually having trouble even handling his own situation. Like, he feels powerless. He's just sitting there in his cell alone, fretting, right? Completely powerless. And then we cut over to the people down below, the kids in the arcade, who are lying low. It's an old steampunky style arcade, kind of how actually real-life arcades were. I know that sounds strange, but for those of you in the audience who are somewhere approaching my age, you might know that arcades actually predate the video game era. If you've seen Back to the Future 3, of all things, you might know what I'm talking about. But they used to be physical stands and things that you would build, and they would like kind of move back and forth on rails and stuff like that. You get it. So you kind of get the idea. They're in this kind of arcade and just having fun with it, doing things. That's cool, and I'm with it. I'm absolutely thumbs uppy. It's a great bit of establishing moment. We also see, although they almost spend a little bit too much time on it, but I do like the little tidbit of Powder being a really, really good shot, which makes sense since she's the artificer. So, Jesus, really? Dr. Winter. I mean, I'm trying really hard not to geek out about it, but her boxing technique was actually really fascinating. If some of you may remember that I myself used to be really interested in boxing. Not in a long time, of course. And so you can see a lot of technique. A lot of people think that boxing... excuse me, let me say this very clearly. A lot of people very stupidly think that boxing is a dumb sport. That all you do is you just slug the other person until one of you falls down. No, there's a lot of technique and a lot of movement and a lot of very precise things you can do in boxing, just like in any martial arts, especially competitive martial arts. So yeah, boxing's hard. So I absolutely appreciated a lot of the work that went into Vi as well. So we see really, really good, well-researched. I keep covering these shows that are well-researched. It's such a treat. Really well-researched boxing match, and then we see a really, really well-researched shooting match too. It's also even it's even doubly funny because the way that Milo, I've already forgotten his name, the rogue guy, was shooting is going to result in him not doing well. Like his stance was wrong and he was doing this thing occasionally, and of course he's going to fail at his hits. And she was actually bracing herself properly, and of course she's going to do a better job of that. Just little tidbits there. Anywho, good scene, good establishing scene. Good action, by the way, in a scene that doesn't really have any activity. And then, yeah, he does the gangster thing. Although, there's a whole line we could go down that rabbit hole. Let's not do that. But then, we see the topsiders and the trenchers. I think one of those words was mentioned last episode, but this is when we really established that terminology. But then something really caught my attention. And it's such a minor thing that I'm sure nobody even gives a damn about. And I'm sure most of you just breezed right over it without hesitation. But I couldn't help but write 3 paragraphs of notes on this. See, one of the cops picks up the guy and throws him through the window. And you're thinking, yeah, he's a corrupt cop and that guy's a lesser person. But no, think about that for a minute. We have corrupt cops in real life. I'm not trying to make this into a polemic thing. It's true. It's a true fact. And yet, in real life, in most countries, if a cop was just to pick up someone physically and bodily throw them through a window, that cop would be fired or dead. That is way above and beyond what you have in any kind of... Yeah, this is an attempted murder. Exactly, ISD. This is the kind of thing that actually does a really good job of demonstrating exactly what kind of social order exists here. This is rampant corruption to the point of horrific levels of violence. The kind of stuff we have had historically in the past. Yeah, and I was actually about to say they're not named cops. There are cops. They are cops. Everything about them shows that they are law enforcement officials. But yeah, they're called enforcers, not policemen or not officers or anything else that they do. They're called enforcers. And yeah, I wasn't even going to get into the Pinkertons. But for real, I know that it's a great establishing shot, and it is, but really divest yourself from the show for a moment and think about this for a second. Think about getting, if someone spat on your shoe, your reaction to that was attempted murder. Really process that for a second. And immediately after that, what he does is he sees some kid cowering in the thing. So he immediately says, search him. What? That is actually psychopathic. I'm sorry. And again, it's such a thing you just kind of walk over it. But no, this struck me. He actually pulls his gun on the kids. He does it later, but he still pulls a gun on children. No, I missed it. I meant to go back, and forgive me. I'm not sure if this guy in question is Marcus, because we see Marcus several times throughout this episode. But this is messed, is what this is. It is okay, so it was Marcus. I thought so, but I meant to double check, and I forgot. I apologize. Wow. And then we have our actual action sequence, but I was thrown by that. Like, you know what? Okay, let's just move on. We'll come back to that. So we have our action sequence. The kids have to escape. Marcus pulls a goddamn gun on kid. We cut to the pacing of this is so good. It's so good. We cut to Mel. I've been writing names down because there's so many names being shotgunned at me, and you know I'm terrible at names. So we cut to Mel. Now they do probably the worst exposition in the show so far with her, which ironically is still good, but they do some quick establishment with her of, and I forget how I meant to write down the exact quote, but they mention how she is the richest person in town, but she's the poorest member of her family. With that one line, obviously we establish her, but we get a little glimpse into the greater world. The idea that Piltover, for all its upper elite classism, super hotty-toddy, the upper society thing, is still actually considered something of a backwater compared to whatever else is out there. Probably a nice city for all intents and purposes, but certainly not to the heights of insert name here or insert other name here, right? You get the vibe. You get that vibe just right there, and it's like, okay, interesting. And she even mentions that Piltover is just this kind of place, and I'm just like, whoa. Yeah, no, exactly. The way she says it, love the voice acting. This is just so good. So very quick establishment of that. And then she does something, and God, I love that they don't call this out. I love that they don't emphasize this to the audience. she grabs one of the toys, right? And says, this one. And that's for a child's toy. And she says, perfect. Doesn't explain it. Then we skip forward a little bit. We quickly discuss Caitlin. We discuss Jace. This is where some of that political corruption comes in. A lot of cronyism going on. A lot of nepotism going on. And then we cut back down to Vance? God, I'm losing names here. What's his friggin' name? So many names here written down. I've got my own little cheat sheet here. Vander. Thank you. Vander. Excuse me. I apologize. So we cut to Vander. We crossed that bridge once before, and we all know how that ended. Under normal circumstances, that would just be a line, but that is... I like that. I like smart wordplay like that. That was good. That was good. Immediately caught me there. And there's also this wonderful little bit where he says, as he's giving his speech, can I pause for a second? I'm going to say something very egotistical. I apologize. I'm a really good director, because one of the things a really good director does is they think about exactly what is being shown while certain things are happening on a particular scene. When I was creating the World of Lorecraft series, I put a tremendous amount of thought into what exact shot I would have for every single line of narration that I was reading over the course of that thing. I needed it to be the exact right shot. It either needed to be interesting or relevant or significant. I do not sign my notes, no. It needed to be something that was thought out. And as a direct consequence of that, I cannot help but notice it when other directors do the same. Funnily enough, the person who directed this show also directed a movie you may have heard of called Toy Story 2, which also pulls the exact same trick. The camera is always pointing at what it should. While Vander is giving his speech about how we take care of each other, we always have, the camera pans over to Huck, I think was his name? The guy earlier who was having issues back in episode 1 during Vander's second establishment scene. Little stuff like that. There's actually another one later I'll call out as well, but the camera is always doing really smart stuff. And of course I noticed the shrine on the bridge. They show it twice, I believe, and just in this episode. Yeah, no, and the bridge as its iconography is fantastic, and of course there's a thematic significance there, but getting ahead of myself. So, camera pans over there, and he tries the same general play that he approached the two thugs with earlier. He comes down hard. Do I look like I'm afraid? The problem is it just bounces off of a wall, which makes sense. See, speaking as someone who's played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons in my life, or various forms of P&P games, there's certain dice rolls that can't succeed, right? You can't actually succeed at certain types of dice rolls. I don't care if you rolled a 37. You're not going to convince them that you're the Queen of England. It's just not happening, right? And that is exactly what's been happening to these people. We get the very strong impression, this is very brilliantly done, that this oppression that they've been going through is not recent by any measure of the imagination. That this is something they've been suffering for long enough for Melkor to actually go ahead and subscribe to me. Now, that's one of the most terrifying things that can happen to anybody under any circumstances. I'm not sure if I'm going to survive this incident, unless Melkor actually tells me what they want to put it towards, in which case, things might be okay. But until then, peasant rebellions. I know that's a weird way to go with this, but hear me out for a second. I've talked about this before. Human nature is such that we don't generally, just as a species, we tend to not like changing stuff unless we have to, right? Now, obviously, there's a lot of asterisks and exceptions to that, but what I mean by that is when we are pushed, we tend to just live with it. We tend to just endure it. And what tends to happen is that the person pushing us then tends to push us more. Then we live with it a little bit less. We get disgruntled, we grumble, we make fun, we go back to our jobs, we go back to our games, and we just rant about how awful things are on Reddit threads, or on phone calls, or at the recess playground, or at the local tap caf, or whatever. And then we get pushed a little bit more. And it reaches a point. I usually call it a breaking point. And once you get to a breaking point, it's broken. Thus, peasant rebellion. Because at that exact moment in time, now there's no turning that around. You have sufficiently been dehumanized, abused, misused, oppressed, whatever word you want to use here, to the point where you're not actually going to be able to deal with it. Yeah, Star Wars A New Hope, ironically, I was going to bring up that exact same thing, ISD. Star Wars A New Hope actually does a pretty good job of getting across this exact same point. The idea here is that this oppression didn't start like a few minutes ago, or a few hours ago, or for years ago, that this has been systemic for decades. Both A New Hope and Arcane Episode 2, I know, weird comparison, do a good job of getting across to us, the audience, that this is something that's been going on for a long time. And that's why they have been pushed and pushed and pushed to the point where we're about at the breaking point. We're not actually at the breaking point yet, but we're getting there. Trails in the Sky block. Rayman Legends. FF16 and a thank you. Thank you, Malcorblade. This took a lot of work to make. There's also only one version of it because there's only one thing possible for it, but I'm rather proud of it. Moving on. Thank you for noticing, though. So, Peasant Revolt. She's so far gone. Dragon Age Origins, another good example. The mages were not locked up 10 years ago. This has been going on for a while. So, we get the point pretty quickly here that we're reaching that breaking point. We're probably functionally at that breaking point. You know, one more step, and that's going to be it. And so they can't deal with this anymore. So for all of Vander's attempts to talk them down, it's not going to work. Even if you roll a natural 20, it doesn't matter, right? So then we cut back to Mel, and she walks into the room with the other counselors. She drops the little child's toy next to the thing here. I'm told only the finest minds can... It's built for only the finest minds or something like that. And the whole scene, he's struggling with it. This is our second insight into how the council works. So we've already got... oh, God, I've already forgotten how to pronounce his name. Heimerdinger? I wrote Heimer... That's what I have written down, Heimerdinger. Oh, yeah, then there's the nuts thing. You know I'm allergic. So he's an idiot, right? But he's the counselor. Now, his characterization, whoever this guy is, he's the most overtly obvious of the counselors. He's a moron. We've also got the vacillating Toady. That's the guy who was eating the nuts. And then we've got Heimerdinger, who is probably positively inclined, but still willing to manipulate and screw over the system, and not actually try to fix the system that's in place that is so clearly broken. Then we've got Mel, who is just completely wrapping the entire council around her finger. I'm sure you noticed that she ran that trial, right? That even though Mr. I can't figure out a child's toy guy was the one who was at the head of the table, she was the one pushing things forward at every step. She's also the one who very deliberately provoked Jace into revealing the truth. And then when he did, was the only one trying to get to the heart of what he was actually talking about, as opposed to everyone else who was just immediately falling back and everything. She's also the one who specifically asked the question, has anybody else even tried? When it came to scientifically approaching magic. And yes, Vivian's voice actress, sorry. I was going to get to there. I actually found that out in a minute. But anyways, apparently Heimerdinger is the head of the council. He does not act like it. I would not have known that if you had not told me that. He does not act like that at all. But anyways, we get a quick glance at the other council members. We've got the woman with the clockwork necklace and the wonderful claws. We've got the guy with the clockwork head, who apparently is from a different race that was severely endangered by magic. Lots of implications there. Lots of good exposition going on here. Okay, I'm with it. Some very Arcanum, or Arcanum if you prefer, vibes. I'm with it. I mentioned the thing about Mel here. This is when the woman shows up. The mother of Jace. I don't actually remember her name. And she begins her speech with, though I am of a lower house. This immediately implies two things right off the bat. First of all, that the only way that she can even get a voice at the council is by actually immediately deferring to their superior nature. And second, that even amongst Hightown, there are still hierarchies. Obvious in hindsight, but still something to establish. Okay, I'm with that. So, um, we see a lot of how there's some wonderful world building going on here too. Did you notice that the very method by which that they use this, it's all very technological, right? They use technology in virtually everything. Yes, I actually did notice that, Dr. Winter. And the way that they control the room is they just turn the council room into this giant courtroom by blocking out the sun with their tech. Almost assuredly a deliberate bit of symbolism, but then they also very strategically use that tech to open shafts in specific spots. One, to put a light onto Jace, to put him on the spot, but also to indicate who's voting for what. There's several aspects of this throughout this, but this is the most overt aspect that jumped out at me, and I wanted to comment on it while we were here. So we see that these people aren't just steampunky, that they live and breathe their technology. They use it on a fundamental everyday basis, which is excellent because it means the writers of this actually thought about that for 5 milliseconds and decided to actually do it. Quick aside, one of the things that bothers me is that someone will be like, hey, here's real life, here's a fictional setting which has, I don't know, the ability to turn into squids on demand. And yet, the everyday life of that society, that setting in which this is set, is just based on real life, except they can occasionally change into squids. What a good writer will do, what a good world builder will do, and I have no idea who gets credit for this, I'm just commenting on it, is they will think about that. They will think about how much that will impact. How much will it impact daily life? How much will it impact economy? How much will it impact technological progress, medical progress, cultural and social norms? These kind of things are affected by these kind of changes to the system, and when you have the sheer level of steampunk technology that these people have, obviously it's going to affect them on a day-to-day basis, and lo and behold, here we are. So, actual thinking about consequences with it. So, actually, yeah, in the MCU, to use a direct example, they have access to ludicrously advanced tech well before we get to Endgame, and yet the world is still just, 2010s for everyday real life, right? Anyways. So then evil guy, I don't think I have a name for this guy yet, one-eye guy, reaches out to Marcus. And what's really funny is even remember when I wrote this down, I didn't realize this was the guy who was a psychopath from earlier, flinging through the window. But he is obviously a complete moron. You're an enforcer for an oppressive regime, and you have been invited down to a private area and been told to come alone. Do you? He also very clearly showcases his biases, which is not only here, but in a future scene. I'll bring that up when we get there. But yeah, so Marcus is showcasing his intellectual capacity immediately. Nice bit of a counter-establishment there. This could also be very routine. That's a good point. I was assuming it's just him being stupid because of how he acts the rest of the episode. But you're right, he could also be just, things could just be that bad. So, there's been this guy in the background this whole time. You've probably been thinking I missed him, and you would, of course, be extremely wrong. Victor is his name. He first showed up when Jace was going back through his room, and his room was being searched. But Victor has been there for a lot of scenes, and he's been paying attention for a lot of scenes. And then we get our second quiet scene, and this is probably one of the better examples of a tense scene in the entire episode, because it's very quiet. There's even a bit of an audio sound and a bit of muffledness over the sound design. The sound engineering is great. So there's a bit of like almost a dull hum in the background, and everything sounds just a little bit muffled, like things aren't as echoey as they normally would be. Why is that relevant? It sounds like they're underwater, but it also makes the scene sound more muted. So then evil guy, still don't have his name, is trying to convince thug guy, I don't think they've said his name, in order to go ahead and take this drug thing. And he gives this wonderful speech about power and how you have to be the one who's willing to reach out and do something to claim it. Now, this is a great scene. But I said I'd point out a second amazing directorial camera trick. While he's talking, while he's trying to convince him, Deckard apparently, that's the thug, is saying, no, no, it'll kill me. He says that line while the camera is inside the glass containment, which is where the cat was from the end of the previous episode. We can see the glass is partially broken and there's blood splatters on it, and that frames the scene, so it's right here in between the camera and Deckard, who is still talking to evil guy. That's great. And they don't even, it would have been great even if, like, Deckard turned to look at the camera briefly, as in he's actually looking at the thing. But the fact that he doesn't even look at the camera makes it even better. They're not calling attention to it for the characters, they're calling attention to it for us. Again, always thinking about what's in the shot based on what's happening in the moment. It is fantastic direction. And I said I'd only bring up the 2 examples because otherwise we'll be here all day. But trust me, that kind of stuff is everywhere in this show. So, he decides to go and do it. Clunk! Chugs the sucker down. It's like, ah! And we see a little bit of the transformation for the first time. And also an explanation of what those frickin' veins are that are coming out of his lap that we saw earlier when he was talking to Marcus. Moving forward, there was something that was hinted at earlier, and that is that Jace and Caitlin are friends. And now he's being told to piss off, which makes sense. This is also after he himself has pissed away from his mother. So let's recap here. Jace has lost his job and his ability to pursue the only ambition he's ever held his entire life. He's also just lost his family, and now he's just lost his friend. Oh, and it's raining. Meanwhile, I have to mention, I know I said I wouldn't talk too much about the little details, but I have to mention this. So there's a scene where Grayson and Marcus are giving a report to the council. The evil, corrupt, stupid, dumb, bungling, worthless, terrible, no good, very bad council. And I'm sorry, I can tell you right now, every problem in this city is their fault. I'm just saying it right now. So, there's Grayson, and over here is Marcus. Marcus is standing about a foot behind Grayson, but otherwise, just kind of doing his thing. And Grayson is up here. She's much more animated. She's doing her thing, talking, discussing, etc., etc. And during this section, there's this little bit where Marcus over here leans forward just a bit, takes a half a step forward and says, "Oh, we'll find them, don't worry." It then cuts to her. She turns like this, doesn't really quite look at him at first, but just kind of moves the thing. And she's not actually physically moving. She's just leaning her head towards him, like physically pushing him back a little bit right there. Like, and we need to be cautious, we need to do this and blah, blah, blah. And then she goes to bed and keeps talking to the council. His reaction is to physically pull back just a little bit at her movement into his space, which was the desired intent. Look at her, hesitate for a moment, look down, and then physically take another step backwards. It's so subtle, I would legitimately believe that most people didn't even notice that. Everything I just described happens in the space of about 3 seconds. It's so wonderfully done, though. It's so incredibly animated. And how she just so quietly, effortlessly gets him to back down a little bit. Oh, I love it. I love the detail. I love the attention to detail. So, probably Bionic Monk, almost assuredly. Grayson feels like she has been the one sane man, right, or whatever that trope is called, who's been keeping the enforcers as good as they are for as long as they have been. And it's probably one of the reasons why there hasn't been another open revolt since the bridge incident. Netflix, Baron. This is on Netflix. And I was just about to say, and we also know who her counterpart is, because they've literally already met and shared drinks and chatted about it. Vander. So, okay. We've got our two. We've got our 2 people who are trying to hold this crap together. Just crazy good stuff. Then, one last little detail. When Meccano Guy says, "You must do whatever it takes in order to do this," Meccano Guy, I don't even know his name. Don't tell me. He's interesting, though, because he's the one who is most overtly scared by the events of this break-in. And we know that there's no bomb under the table, to extend the metaphor a little bit. We know that there's nothing how do I explain this? We know that this isn't a big deal, right? Some kids decided to go do a job, tried to rob a place. It went bad. There was an accident. That's it. In reality land, this is a joke. But the people in universe don't know any of that, and everyone's freaking out about it because a guy who was studying magic, which is a big taboo in the society for several reasons, both valid and not, is someone whose lab was just ransacked and then to set off an explosion. Of course it was intended. Of course they're actually after something. Of course someone's up to something, right? Doesn't that make so much sense? I bring up Techno Guy again, Mr. Cyborg Boy, because he specifically mentioned that magic nearly destroyed my people. And I point that out. He didn't say our people. He said my people. Now, it's possible he's just an egotistical twat. It's also possible he's specifically referring to maybe like a faction or something like that. I don't know. But either way, he is the one who most overtly acts afraid every time the magic thing is brought up amongst the counselors. Idiot guy, the guy who couldn't figure out the child's toy, his approach is pretty much the same. What a bother. We can't deal with that. Get rid of it. And that's pretty much his whole shtick. Nut-eating guy, the only thing he's got going on is the fact that he really likes his position, and he really doesn't want to bother with any of this. Mel is obviously playing, and Heimerdinger is trying to keep everything together in his own personal way. But Cyborg Guy is the one who's pushing his foot down. He is the one who specifically says, do whatever it takes in order to get this down to the bottom of this. And he says it with just a tiny note of fear. And then, of course, it cuts over to Marcus, whose face visibly clenches at that order. Meanwhile, we cut immediately to the response to this. How many of you have seen Jurassic Park, first film? The good one. Arguably the only good Jurassic Park film, but I don't want to get down to that. Definitely the best Jurassic Park film, one way or the other. Jurassic Park taught me something about storytelling. This isn't true. This is 100% truth. And I think I talked about it in my room. And that is that one of the best ways to do a scene transition is to end a scene on a question and then begin the next scene on the answer. Now, Jurassic Park takes that pretty literally. There's some cases where a character will literally say, why would he turn off all the other electric fences? And then it would physically cut to Nedry, who was actually pushing open with his bare hands an electric fence. Stuff like that, right? So we go immediately from this question mark of this scene to the answer of them going directly down to the bar and directly confronting Vander. Okay. So I mentioned that because they could have handled that kind of a transition a lot of other ways. And in fact, this whole episode has been playing with different types of transitions. We've got event, side event, side event, event. We've got event, side event, that's related, event. We've got event, completely unrelated event, event. And then we've got event, immediate consequence event. Those are the ones I've been keeping track of so far. Yeah, where's the goat? Thunk! Anyways, if you know, you know. So we see this. He tries to intimidate him. We see wonderful cleverness in the mechanisms. I love that despite the almost sci-fi bent of the steampunk, they're still relying on effectively basic levels of stuff, basic levels of tech. Like he just activates a button, which activates a little thing up there, which causes a little guy with the symbols to fall off. And there you go. There's your warning. Okay. So yeah, no, I'm completely with that. We have an extremely tense scene. This is yet another example of how you can have a high, of course she did, ISD. We have another high tension scene without a lot of action. Not very much is going on, but I mean, I'm sorry, I don't want to go for the jugular here, but I cannot be the only one who gets hiding the Jews from the Nazis vibes from this scene, right? Very, very Schindler's List kind of a thing. It's terrifying, and it's tense, and it's absolutely horrifying, as it should be, as that kind of a scene needs to be. Okay. So that's awesome, right? Like everything about that, just it's very, very tense. The fact that they show us that Powder is struggling to hold on, first of all, is extremely relatable, if I might be so bold. But second of all, adds to the tension because it's not just the fact that they might be discovered, but it's falling apart a little bit by bit, and everyone's just trying desperately to hold on, right? How many of you have ever, do you remember, either now or when you're a child, you don't have to oust yourself, of how difficult it is to carry your own body weight with your arms? Something as simple as a pull-up, or maybe you had to climb the rope, right, with just your arms. You probably know the type of thing I'm talking about. And if you do, you understand that's harder to do than it sounds. We as human beings weigh more than you'd think. Like, you think, oh, I only weigh like 150 or whatever. Have you ever lifted 150 pounds? It's not easy. I actually distinctly remember the first time I ever managed my first pull-up. Now, I've always been kind of a big guy, but I didn't manage that till I was in high school. And that was after a lot of weightlifting and a lot of preparation, a lot of getting to that point, right? I had to build up to that point. I remember that because I was so proud of it, because I'd been trying to work for it on literal years at that point. So yeah, that's hard to do. So I stare. So I stare. Yeah, it's also very unevenly distributed weight. That's a very good point too. So I look at Powder up there. She's just a kid, and she's trying to hold on and just desperately trying to keep herself on that pipe and not fall. And my heart's just going out to her, because at a certain point your muscles just start to break down and can't function anymore. The acid starts crystallizing, and you just can't hold on anymore, right? Like there's so good. Yeah, and this is all just adding to the wonderful tension. Meanwhile, to further add to the tension, because they could have just done that and it would have been great. But then they decided to add a little bit of extra flavoring on top of things, because they decided they wanted to also show Marcus, who was trying to push Vander the entire time, and trying to, I'm going to get to the heart of things, and I'm going to destroy everything, and blah, 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 and trying to talk his way and intimidate down Vander. Naturally, Marcus, who is a weenie nothing boy, give me your strongest stuff. Pro tip, if anybody actually has to specifically ask for the strongest stuff, they're not ready for it. So Marcus, who's trying really, really hard to talk about how giant his dick is here, is failing miserably, and Vander's just talking circles around him, just absolutely crushing him, verbally, charismatically speaking. You need help? Okay. Yeah, he's a big boy now. He can actually handle the big boy alcohol. I don't know how many of you noticed, but there was actually a thing in the alcohol that he was going to consume. I also noticed he never actually took a sip of it. He took a sniff of it, and like he physically recoiled when he sniffed it, just like that. But then, he drops the guy's pipe and it sets the fire, and he's doing all this thing, and he's trying very, very hard to just prove that he's a big boy. But what I love most is there's a single line. I'm going to talk positively about myself again for 1 second. I apologize. I'm a really good writer. It's something that I am legitimately proud of. And a lot of that is down to reiteration, being willing to go back over a line over and over and over and over again to make sure that that line pops, right? That it sounds exactly how it should. And you know that whoever wrote this pulled that trick, right? Pulled that trick, because there's obviously the dialogue in general is just fantastic throughout. But he says a specific line. 6 years! Oh, wow! No, I believe it. There's a specific line that he says, that Marcus says, which I wrote down word for word. We all know there is a crime behind every coin that passes through this place. And that line says so much. Now, before I go forward, thank you very, very much, Chill Pangolin. Always appreciate you. Much obliged. And if you want to put the turds up to 3 things, please, as always, let me know. Oh, it's such a good line, and it says so much. So let's talk about elitism for a second. I don't want to completely go down the rabbit hole in elitism, and Lord knows we're seeing quite a few different types being presented in this show. But there's a specific form of elitism. It's kind of a blaming elitism, right? There's, well, I'm just naturally better than you. There's, well, I chose to be better than you. But then there's another type of elitism, which sounds the same, but actually is different. And it's your fault you're worse than me. It's blaming. It's all about specifically pointing to whatever this other group is. In this case, the people of Zon, I think is what they call it. The Trenchers is what they call them as a slur. And saying, you are at fault for the fact that this place sucks. This is your fault. This is all on you for choosing, the Zonites, thank you. This is all on you for choosing to have everything down here function entirely around the idea of crime. And you don't pull out the crime, the C word, for nothing. You don't just pull that out when you mean it literally, as absolutely bizarre as that sounds. You pull that out when you're trying to make a point. You pull it out when what you're saying, because what they actually mean is what you are doing is wrong. You have chosen to be a bad person. That's what he's actually saying. If you break it all down, if you break down that sentence, and it's wonderful writing, that's what he's saying. You have all chosen, 100%, to a man, to choose to be a bad person. And therefore, it's on you. It's not his fault. And you see the problem there. Sid Meier's Pirates, 2D platformer block, and super lesbian animal RPG. You got it. Thank you. And yeah, you can see why I've singled out this line so much. This line does so much heavy lifting. This line exposits so much, so quickly, and so efficiently. And it's fantastic. And keep in mind, the episode, we're 2 episodes in. We have already clearly identified who I am willing to put with 90% certainty are the actual impetus for why this city sucks. It's the council. The council sucks. There might be someone else behind the council. We'll find out as we go. But they're the ones causing issues with the high, causing issues with the low, causing issues with the poor, causing issues with the undercity. Right? So, we then see a little bit of an interesting contrast. Heimerdinger is trying really hard to talk down Jace most of this episode, trying to settle him, trying to get him back into, like, just take care of the poor kid. And Vander is trying to talk down Vi. Jace is specifically seeking out magic because he believes it will give a better life, most especially for one person who matters very much to him, his mother. Vi very much wants to do everything that she can in order to get a better life for her people, most especially her sister, Powder. And so we see, yeah, magic literally saved his mom. And Powder does not have a great upbringing. Now, they both say this outright in the episode. And as I mentioned before, there is both showing and telling, something that I am in favor of when it comes to non-interactive storytelling, is that they'll show something for the people who are paying attention and then they'll tell it for the people who aren't. And I don't mean that as an elitist statement either. It actually makes a lot of sense, right? Not everyone is sitting there with a notepad like I am, trying to pay attention to every little detail as they go. You know? So, it makes sense. It makes sense where they're going from. It makes sense where they're coming from. It makes sense what they're trying to accomplish. And yeah, Heimerdinger, he says he's 307 years old. I actually wrote down the number. Arcane's apparently getting a physical release? I didn't know that. On what? Blu-ray, I assume? Actually, yeah, Chill Pangolin. Thank you, TSB, very, very much, as always. I will go ahead and I will jot that down for In Other Waters, Goodbye Volcano High, and Road Warden. So, we've got this wonderful dichotomy between the two, and we've got Vander, who cuts right to the heart of it. Like, there's a lot of ways he could try to convince Vi of why he's doing what he's doing. But he goes right for the jugular, and I appreciate that, because what he's functionally doing there is he's treating Vi like she's an adult, which, given the environment and society she lives in, she functionally is. So, I understand how you feel. I understand why you think the way you think. My actions, in reaction to the way you feel, got your parents killed. So, I know that you want to hurt the high people, the Hightown people. Who are you willing to lose to hurt them? Just right there. Does not even try to do anything other than just go straight for the gut. Yeah. And Vi crumbles at that. Did you notice that? She was angry, she was aggravated, she was dejected, and Vander's statement on that just really cuts through her and does get to her. You can tell very, very efficiently. The really funny part about this, and by funny I mean absolutely horrific, is Vander doesn't actually have a plan right now. He doesn't. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how to deal with this. Because, let me derail for just a second. Oh yeah, he actually specifically took her near the shrine, near the bridge to give her this speech. Because of course he freaking did. But yeah, Vander's trying to status quo it, which isn't going to work long term, and we know that. Anybody who's studied any history ever knows that's not going to work long term. There needs to be a change, right? But where's that change going to come from, and how much is it going to cost? As Lord Harrowmont probably jokingly mentioned earlier, peasant rebellions usually don't succeed. So, what do? They could take Jace's route. I haven't gotten to that yet. How many of you have heard of a game called Pentiment? It's a game by Obsidian, and it's a game that I actually highly recommend. It's a great game. I'm not looking at the next episode title yet. I've been trying to be pretty quiet about this. I obviously know the next episode title in the past because I had to write all that stuff down on the spreadsheet. As a reminder, you can type !Extermination or !Exterminations into chat in order to pull up that spreadsheet. But so Pentiment's a great narrative game. Fantastic stuff. Absolutely love it. Everything's fantastic about that. I'm trying to find something very specific here. So I'm not actually sure where it is, and I feel very stupid for that. I'm sorry. I even meant to write this down, and I didn't. Yeah, we're going to hit episode 3 today. It's only, like, it's barely my lunch break. I've got time for another. I might have time for a 4th episode today. We'll see. We'll see. I'm definitely committing to 3. One moment, please. There it is. So, I'm not in a rush, Dr. Winter. I just have more time. That's all. I told you, we're doing this like a normal stream schedule. I got 10 hours every day to work with here. So, Pentiment. Some of you may or may not know. I'm going to talk around spoilers here, but in Pentiment, there is a high-blooded person, someone of noble birth or noble standing, who ends up, having something bad happen to them as a direct consequence. Someone has to pay. They don't care who. They don't care if the person who pays is guilty. They don't care if there's any significance to it. They just care that someone has to pay. I could derail this into talking about the greater societal need for people to cause punishment to others as a way to make themselves feel better. Let's not do that. The point is, that's the common thread there. Now, this is a semi-common thing because this is a real thing in real life, because someone has to pay for these kind of things. But I was running a D&D module during my extreme working break as a way to keep myself intellectually engaged while doing, really big physical work, right? That D&D module is called The Scarab of Death. I'm actually curious if anybody's ever heard of that. It's a great module, probably one of the best ones I've ever run. It is an official module. I purchased that, and it's really solid. But again, not to spoil, but in The Scarab of Death, a 5th edition. In The Scarab of Death, I know it's going to sound shocking, someone dies. I know, it's shocking. And there's a noble guy involved who absolutely insists that someone has to pay. It doesn't really matter who. Like, the player has a tremendous amount of choice and malleability in who they decide to finger and whose evidence they put towards what. But as long as someone pays, you can already see the trend I'm going at here, right? This is a common trend in real life as well as in fiction, because all that really matters is that someone hurts for all this. And have you noticed that in both episode 1 and episode 2, the council's big shtick is that someone has to pay. All they care about is that it's someone. In fact, the dope guy, idiot boy, I'm just going to start calling him, actually says that outright. The people are scared, is what he says. We need results. Someone has to pay. They don't care who. They don't care why. They don't care if they're guilty. Remember that, because we're going to circle back to that in a minute, okay? Meanwhile, yeah, just let the outlaws pay. They're criminals anyways. Remember, every single thing they do down here is criminal activity, right? Why would you care if a criminal paid for a crime? Doesn't matter if they didn't commit that crime. So, Jace attempts suicide. You're welcome, you two. This is a hell of a scene. Actually, a really strong scene. I think what I love most is exactly how hesitant he is to do it. But I also completely believe that he is willing to do this, that he is willing to go ahead and make that jump. He even took off his bracelet. Did you catch that? Of course he did. But what's really fascinating about this scene is that he's interrupted by Victor. Oh, that's not the fascinating part. Of course he's interrupted by Victor. Victor is fascinating about this. Oh yeah, by the way, they never even say the word suicide. They don't have to. Why would they have to say that? This whole show is doing this wonderful thing where they're treating us like we have a freaking brain. I cannot tell you how refreshing that is. Do you know how much fiction I analyze on a regular basis? I actually did notice that ISD. I was going to comment on that after I finished talking about Victor. Did you notice that he's not high enough to guaranteed die? Now, I phrase it that way very specifically because he might. You know, a fall from 10 feet will kill you if you hit the right angle. But he's only about a story and a half up. Like, the ground's right there. I've fallen from that height before in real life. I've jumped off the bleachers at an auditorium before, which is actually pretty scary, I'm not going to lie to you, but the point is, I landed just fine. He might not die from that high of a jump. Wouldn't that just be even worse? Or maybe even worse, he just gets to lay there and bleed out, because, hey, that might be a thing, too. Getting back to the point. Victor. So Victor shows up to try and essentially talk him off the ledge. But not because Victor's a good person. And I know that sounds weird, but did you notice how extremely manipulative Victor is in this moment? Like, he doesn't show up here cautious, caring, considerate. He's not trying to save a person's life. He doesn't give a damn about Jace. Victor gets across in this one scene something really impressive about his characterization. Because I can tell you right now, Victor is driven. And that's his primary character trait. I'm willing to say it right here. I'll take my bit of crow if I'm wrong. But he is driven. And so he sees this situation as another opportunity to take advantage of to try and push his agenda forward. We even get a bit of inspiration as to why. He's a cripple in a world that absolutely does not value any of that. No house, no name, no money. He needs a frickin' cane to move around. So, he takes advantage of the situation. I am your last hope. Of course Jace goes for it. Then we go to Grayson, who, I feel the need to point this out, physically throws Marcus against the table for his idiocy. Physically grabs him and shoves him. We actually don't see the grab shove. All we see is the result of the shove, and then her standing there where he used to be. But still, flings the guy against a table. You moron. And there's this wonderful bit where she's like, what the hell were you doing? And Marcus's response is, I was getting results. Which is hilarious, because remember how many results he got about his raid of Vandersbar? Oh, that's right. He didn't get any. He found nothing. So, then this song fires up, and we have this nice thing, and to be continued. But, just... I've always said I'm a fan of string continuity, but damn. That's some string continuity right there, because we're just going to go immediately to the next episode, I'm sure. But... I had a random thought as we were going through this sequence. Torches. obviously I can't do this the way I want to do this. And I want to talk about that very, very briefly. So if you'll forgive me if I'm indulgent. For those of you who care about the show, we're kind of done talking about the show for the moment because I want to do something very brief. I just want to show something, okay? So, council. It's always the council. Even in Star Trek, it was the frickin' council. So obviously I've got this nice background. I'm very proud of it. I spent a lot of time and effort making this background. You probably can't even tell. It's actually edited too, to make it as seamless as it can be. But let's say I really wanted to discuss, I don't know, Voyager Season 3, Episode 25, the worst case scenario, okay? So let's say I've got the episode up here in the background. And everything's cool. You know, that's cool. Everything's cool. It's there. And I don't know the format that the window would have, but, you know, I'd probably have, like, the episode up here, you know, or something like that, and then chat over there, and then I'd shrink myself. I'd make myself smaller, because the episode would be the dominant thing, just like it is with the games. Maybe something over here, you know, and then I just have the episode over there like that, something like that. I'm just spitballing, because I want you to understand that this right here, actually, it's a pretty good fit, is proven one of the best possible formats to discuss a show. I should know because I've been doing a Star Trek lore run. And what I've been doing is I've been doing more or less this. It's in person. Obviously, I think I've kind of given that away. But it's in person, so I'm discussing it in person with someone else. But as I'm discussing it, I can do things like, did you notice such and such? Or, I find this particular sequence fascinating. Or whatever, right? I can do something like that as I'm discussing it. The catch here is that I can't actually do this on YouTube. I've done tech tests. I've done several things. YouTube is like, hold up, and just copy wrongs it into oblivion. In some cases, actually blocking the entire video from even being shown, even though this would be an objectively, demonstrably easy demonstration of what transformative work actually means. See you around, Lord Paramount. I will mark you down I will mark your vote down. I could take this to court, that this is so easily, objectively, something that I could call a transformative work. However, I don't have a big legal team, I don't have time to go to court, and I don't have a studio or a network at my back, so all I have is me in my stupid little basement, so I don't do this. The reason I bring this up, though... Oh, also Twitch would destroy me over this, too, while we're on the subject, but I'm getting ahead of myself. But as much as I don't do this because of the visuals, and I'm going to laugh if I get a copyright wrong flag just for this little tidbit I'm showing you here. But if I did something like Arcane like this, I would be copywronged into absolute oblivion. I know what you're thinking. Why would Netflix go after you for that? No. The music. There's a lot of licensed music in this show, I've noticed, and this caught my attention while they were going through the last sequence, where Vi is totally obviously going to turn herself in order to save everyone else. That's her solution to the Kobayashi Maru here, is because the only way it would be even remotely feasible is if I just suddenly hit that button right there, which mutes the audio perfectly, and at that point, because I guarantee you with 100% certainty that music license labels would come after you for this, because that's what they do. I should know. I have a lot of experience with this. Look into Undertale or Kingdom Hearts if you don't believe me for a second. Yeah, you remember hashtag screw CBS? I had to redo so much of my Voyager crap because of this nonsense. So, not happening. Obviously, it's not even possible to begin with. It's not possible at the very beginning. But the music alone would probably destroy it. I mean, for God's sakes, I don't know how many of you have noticed. YouTube now has an AI algorithm that you can use to remove music from certain sections of the footage, which, first of all, does not work at all, and second of all, says a lot about exactly where their priorities are on that and who exactly is pressuring YouTube to get rid of copyrighted material on their platform. Anyways, back down to here. And yeah, several people have suggested watch-alongs. There's actually a lot of ideas that have been tossed around over the years to try and make this work, and none of them work. I'm just going to say that. Just please trust that I've done my due diligence and walked down the line here and explained and really looked into this. And while some options might work for some people under some circumstances, in general, this is what we got. This is the Streaminations format. And that's why it is such a compromise, I guess is the word. And is one of, although not the biggest reason why the streamations in general have been put on hold once we obviously finish the ones that have already been funded. Now, if you'll forgive me, where the hell's my background? I gotta get back to Alexandria. There we go. Let's get back to Alexandria. There we go. Oh, I feel better. Okay, so let's rate this sucker. So I'm thinking red is the floor. It's too good. I don't know what you want from me. This is crazy good stuff. Savacom mentioned an issue earlier, which admittedly I'm fully anticipating not actually liking this show in the end, but because of that. But it doesn't change the fact that it's really, really good. And we also have Lord Harriman's vote, which is also for red. See, the thing is, purple. Does this one push into purple territory? And at the moment, I'm thinking no. However, and I'm going to go ahead and put this prediction out up front, I have a feeling the next episode will finally push forward into purple. I think that the culmination of the first arc and all of the threads that have been pulled through here is probably going to push it into purple. It's probably also going to be a bit of a status quo change. I'm already predicting that. So, yeah, it's the same reason Return of the King is the best Lord of the Rings film. I'm sorry, it's not like the first two films are bad, but Return of the King has all of that extra power behind it because it's the conclusion of the trilogy, right? You get it. You get it. I mean, Mass Effect 3, oh. Sorry, I shouldn't joke about that. But yeah, you have two long, solid 44-minute episodes of awesome building up to it. Of course the payoff is going to just nail it, right? Right, it's going to nail it, right? Having said that, something that I think Lord Harriman suggested, and I've been thinking about this. What do you want to say to like a guessing game, like a variant on the guessing game for these streamations? Well, I'm going to have to figure out a format because it's not as simple as guessing the golden number, right? Well, what do you think about the idea to be? Is anybody interested, I guess is what I'm asking. Does anybody have any engagement there? I feel dirty using the word engagement. I shouldn't use that word. Does anybody want to be engaged? No, not like that. No! Ah! I meant it like Picard. I meant it like Picard. So here's the deal. The way we're tracking these is we give them a color. The color functionally boils down to it functionally boils down to no, I didn't mean engagement like that at all. I literally just mean, do you think it'd be fun? That's all I care about. Do you think it'd be fun? So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? That's roughly the numbers that each color equates to. So what I was thinking is you could guess essentially the final score. Let me explain. So Arcane is 9 episodes, right? If somehow magically every single one of these episodes was a blue, then its score would be 9. Make sense? Because each blue gives 1 point and there's 9 episodes. You get it, right? So roughly how well do you think it would score in terms of a final number? So for example, and I think I do agree with the crowd on this one, we're going to go ahead and give this one a red, which puts us up to 2 red for Arcane there. So if every episode was a red, that would be 45. Although it could go higher than that. This would also mean the overall score, it would always be a range, right? So Arcane could only ever be between, well, everything can start up at 0. The floor is always 0. Because somehow, magically, every episode could be a lamentation. You don't touch your show. But 0 would be the floor, and then the max would be whatever 6 times the number of episodes is, right? So 6 times 9, 6 times 12, 6 times 12, 6 times 16, something like that, right? You get it. So that might not be a bad idea. And in that case, you can just put your guess in the actual guessing game. as like Arcane number. So I'll guess for Bionic Punk here. So we'll say Arcane is guessing it'll be 50. Right? There you go. Boom. And now Arcane has guessed that that's going to be the score for Arcane. The closest person gets things, put it towards it, you get it. That's my thoughts. The guessing sheet should be open right now. And that's because it is. So if anybody wants to do that, you're more than welcome to. If anybody doesn't want to do that, you're more than welcome to. If anyone wants to stab me in the chest, you're more than welcome to. Just make sure I don't live. That's the important part. I do not want to live through a chest wound. That does not sound fun to me. And thank you very much. Ow! Off the deeper end, as always, for the sub. Much appreciated. And as usual, if you wanted to put that towards up to 3 things, please let me know. I could set up something to facilitate this, but at the moment, I'm going to go ahead and chop off. I'm going to go ahead and have lunch, I guess, since I should probably eat lunch at this point. And otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and watch episode 3. So I'll be back in roughly an hour.